In the desert of our doubts, God's provision quenches our spiritual thirst. When people think about or talk about God's provision, a lot of the times they focus on the financial aspect of it, right? Which is true. God is a provider. He's going to make sure all of your needs are met. We just got to take our expectations off of how he does that, but he always provides a ram in the bush, right? But it's not even necessarily just the financial aspect of his provision that he provides. It's also from a spiritual POV. We all experience dry seasons, okay? Seasons of doubt, complacency, and complaining. And I know a lot of people don't like that word when it comes to this walk with God. Oh, you shouldn't complain. You shouldn't complain. When the Israelites complained, God didn't let them into the promised land. First and foremost, it wasn't just their complaining. It was their disobedience, their unbelief, right? Like God literally parted the Red Sea. They're walking through a sea with the water on the opposite sides of you can only be a but God moment. Okay, that is literally a miracle. So they watched and witnessed God's miracle of taking care of them. You know what I'm saying? But yet they still had that disobedience about them. They were still doing things that God told them not to do, and they had unbelief. So yeah, God got fed up and said, this generation isn't going to come into the promised land, but your generation after you will. And guess what they did, y'all? They were disobedient. They turned from the Lord. They worshiped other gods. They started to mix in with the everything God told them not to do. They did it. I always tell people that this journey, like whether it's your walk with God in general, waiting on a promise from God or what have you, it's like a roller coaster, okay? Like you're going to have your days where you're good, bro. Like you're walking in confidence of your faith. Like it's just a good day, spiritually speaking. And then you're going to have days where you don't feel like that. You're going to have your doubtful days. You're going to have your growing weary days. You're going to have your complaining days. But on that ride, on that roller coaster ride, God is with you every single step. He knows we're human. Okay, he knows what we go through. He knows us better than we know ourselves. So part of God's provision is to quench our spiritual thirst, right? All right, so this is coming obviously from a devotion that I got this morning too, y'all, and it was really good, right? So when in Exodus 17, when the Israelites faced a dire situation, thirst in the desert, right? This challenge symbolizes the spiritual thirst we all encounter in life's dry seasons. The people grumble against Moses, questioning God's presence among them. In response, God instructs Moses to strike a rock from which water miraculously flows, okay? This story is not just about physical thirst, but it's also about the spiritual longing we all experience. The water from the rock is a powerful metaphor for God's provision in our most desperate times. It teaches us that even when we doubt and complain, God remains patient, generous, and always ready to meet our needs. Yet the rock symbolizes something deeper. It's an image of Jesus who was struck for our salvation, right? The Israelites' grumbling represents our own doubts and fears. Like them, I always tell people, don't be too mad about the Israelites, bro. I know it's hard because we read how they continuously turn from the Lord, but we are the Israelites just in a different time period, okay? Like them, we often question God's presence and care in our difficulties. A lot of people do this when the storms and chaos start happening in your life, because it tells you in the word, bro. It tells you, God gave you a forewarning that we are going to have to go through trials, troubles, and tribulations. However, when these trials, troubles, and tribulations start hitting, we forget that we're going to have to go through things like this, but God is with us every step of the way. Even if we don't feel him there, he is always there, okay? Yet this story reassures us that God's provision is not limited by our doubts. He can bring forth living water even from the hardest, most unlikely places in our lives. So just like God's provision, even in regards to finances or what have you, something physical, just like how he'll provide in that aspect, he also provides that spiritual provision that you need. So when you're going through your doubts, when you're having a day of weary faith or what have you, God will swoop in, he'll reassure you, he'll drop scripture in you. Like you'll be watching a video or something or reading the word or what have you, and you'll come across scripture or maybe something somebody's talking about that really speaks to your spirit. God is using them to give you a message. God is using his word to give you a message. This is one of the main ways he will speak to you, right? But that's why a lot of times, y'all, and I know you experience this yourself, but even in the comment section, I'll see this on TikTok where I'm watching a video and I go to the comments and people are like, bro, I literally was just going through this, or I was just talking to God about this, or what have you. Like, God is going to reassure you. He is going to give you that spiritual provision that you need. Because again, y'all, despite what people think, not every day is rainbows and butterflies on this walk. We are going to have our days where, like the Israelites, we are groaning and complaining and wondering where the heck God is because of our situation, right? And we know God's timing is perfect, right? He moves on his timing. There is no amount of praying or fasting that you can do to make God move faster than what he is doing, okay? But at the same time, when you're in your waiting season and you're waiting on God to do something, or a promise you're waiting to be fulfilled or what have you, God will give you that spiritual provision that you need to help with your doubt, to help with your worries, to help with your fears, your anxieties, and so on and so forth. I know these seasons can feel like they go on forever, y'all. And I've told you guys, just like in my situation, like being out here in Washington and living in hotels the way I have been for the last 7 months, it has felt like 7 years. You know what I'm saying? It has felt longer than what it has. And this season is temporary, just like your season is temporary. At the same time, though, the way God provides for you, whether it be in all ways, God will provide for you in all ways. And that includes, like I said, spiritual provision as well. So he will lift you up. He will reassure you. He will speak to your spirit regarding your situation. You'll come across scripture and videos or what have you that speak to your situation. That's God giving you that spiritual provision that you need to continue forth into this season. So don't feel like you're letting God down or you're doing wrong. You know what I'm saying? When you have your doubts, when you have your worries, when you have your fears. Yes, the Bible tells us to cast all our worries, doubts, and fears onto God because he cares for us. Yes. Okay. But he knows us as humans, we're going to sometimes get into these. That's why we have to take these thoughts captive and give them to God, y'all. But still, at the end of the day, we are human. Okay. So there are going to be some days where we, squander in our emotion. And even then, God is still faithful and generous to help us and give us that spiritual provision that we need to move forward.